How to prompt for Stable Diffusion 2.1. Hello my friends, how are you doing? So today we're going to look at the prompts, the negative prompts, the render methods, the steps to get you better results. And there are some surprising elements in here. One of the most important things here is of course that with 2.1 the prompt is taken more literally, which is good because you can write things, for example, for elements that are next to each other, in front, behind of each other, on top of each other, so you can describe the scene better. And you want to point out in the prompt what you want to have, also about the style, of course, about the technique, like is it a photography, is it a 3D render, things like that. So far it is not that different from the 1.5 prompt, but it is more literally in what you write in the prompt. Now, the important thing about the prompt here is that you will always need something in the negative prompt. So just think about some parts. They can also be kind of generic. So for example, every time I do photography, I write in the negative prompt blurry, 3D, deformed, ugly, distorted, things like that, that I just don't want to have in my final image. Having a negative prompt greatly improves the output of your image. Now, of course, if we are working with Stable Diffusion 2.1 768, you need to set the resolution to 768 at least 2. Now, here is something that might be surprising. The sampling steps and the CFG scale down here have a lot of impact on how good the image is you get out of your render, and there is a correlation, it seems to me, between these two values. You can also of course choose different sampling method. I have found that Euler A gives a little bit of a softer image and DPM gives a little bit more detail in the image. You will see that in my example. So first let me read to you the prompt that I've created for the first example. Portrait of a beautiful woman, comma, nice skin texture, comma, vivid, comma, radiant, comma, studio light, comma, hyper-realistic, comma, award-winning photography. Now the important part here is I wrote vivid because in 2.1 often photography comes out as a black and white picture. Didn't want to have that, so I put here vivid, but I also put black and white into my negative prompt. Also I wrote studio light and award-winning photography to get a really nice portrait shot with very nice lighting. In the negative prompt I have blurry, comma, 3D, comma, deformed, comma, ugly, comma, distorted, comma, 6 fingers, comma, painting, comma, drawing, comma, black and white, comma, desaturated. So we have all of the elements here we don't want to have, but also by pointing out not 3D, not painting, not drawing, I actually want to have a photo, so to make it really clear to the AI. Here is the render grid that I have created, and here you can see that I have a balance between the CFG scale and the steps used. Let's scroll in here a little bit closer, and you can see here with a very low step number and a low CFG, we get a nice result for 10 steps. That's pretty amazing, but the image is kind of black and white, so this is not what we want to have. Now if we scroll over here, you can see the more steps we are using, the nicer the picture is getting, but it is still kind of desaturated, so not exactly what we want to have. Now when we go back to the 10 steps and we have a stronger CFG scale, you can see even with 10 steps you can get a pretty interesting result. But the more we push up the CFG scale, which still it looks pretty nice, you can see here we have some overexposure in here, and here when we go to 13 steps everything looks a little bit too extreme. The colors here on the highlight and the hair look oversaturated, and here it is pretty much blown out. But the interesting thing is, now when we go here to the side with the 15 CFG scale, you can see that this is evening out and we are getting back to nice details with 40 render steps here on the right. But of course I still find that everything here is a little bit too much, so let's go a little bit back here and you can define for yourself what you think is the best result. I think kind of this image here looks the best, maybe this one, which has a little bit of a different composition also, but you can see here when we scroll out that we have a high CFG scale and also a high step number, and both of them together bring us back to a nice image. So there is a combination between these two, and rendering it with this plot is a really good idea to figure out what is the best setting for the seed that you have found and that you like for your image. But you can also see from the overall grid that for testing, for finding a good scene, we can actually render with a low step number and a little bit higher CFG scale. So we get a nice preview of what an image will look like that has more steps in it. Let's go here to my second example. This time we have a nature scene. So let's look at the prompt first. Again, I'm using 2.8 768, and the positive prompt here is wave crashing against rocks under a lighthouse, cinematic, moody, light shining through the waves, dramatic sky, sunset, beautiful light, exciting, 35 millimeters. So I've described the scene, the mood that I want to have here, the kind of light that I want to have here. And then in the negative prompt, this time I have not so much. I have ugly, blurry, out of frame, low res. In this example, as my render method, I'm using DPM++ 2M. Because DPM, as you will see, gives a nicer, more detailed texture. So here we have again the grid. Let's zoom into it, and you can see already with a low step number and a low CFG scale, we're already getting a nice picture, but we have two lighthouses here for some reason. Now, the more steps I'm using here with 20, I have only one lighthouse that is good, but it's kind of deformed here, also here, and it progresses even to 40 steps, even though we have very nice details here. Now when we go back to the start and we scroll down here, you can see kind of the similar effect where when you have a CFG scale of 13 with only 10 steps, the colors and the contrast is getting blown out, and with 15 this is even stronger. But when we move here to the right to a higher step number, you can see that we are actually getting these nice values back. So the colors are good, the contrast is okay, and we have just one lighthouse. Again, you have to decide for yourself which of the results you find the most pleasing. When we scroll into this one here, you can also see the beautiful details here that we have on the reflecting light of the stone, of the spray of the water, and also the nice textures we have here on the waves and even in the clouds in the sky. So again here, when we look at the overall results, you can see that a CFG scale of 11 or 13 with 40 steps actually gives pretty good results, and also is pretty close to the prompt and negative prompt that we have written in the example. So overall, you can see that with 2.1, it is pretty important to have a negative prompt and to find a good balance between the steps and the CFG scale, because they seem to be stronger connected to each other, but also that the positive prompt is taken more literally, so describe the scene better, the kind of mood and the kind of style you want to have in the image. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye.
Oh, you're still here. So this is the end screen. There's other stuff you can watch like this or that. It's really cool. And yeah, I hope I see you soon. Leave a like if you haven't yet. And well, yeah,